Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Mind Body Energy Project. I am Yolanda.
And I am Tiffany.
It's funny. The reason I even said that, I was just thinking the other day I heard our podcast, like whatever you follow on the podcast on iTunes, it'll automatically play the next one after you listen to one.
Mm-hmm.
So I was listening to a podcast that had nothing to do with us. And then our podcast came up next in the feed automatically.
Oh.
And and I was like, someone's brand new. They might not know who's who. So maybe we should start saying at the beginning.
Oh, I kind of always just thought that we did, but
no, we don't.
Oh, okay.
Well, now we did. So hi, everyone.
Hello. Welcome.
Oh, welcome.
Thanks for joining us.
Happy post-Halloween. Oh, and by the way, I thought of you because my calendar, my what do you call it? Those wall calendars.
Mm-hmm.
Mine said All Saints Day, and then the second was All Souls Day.
Yeah.
And so I think the first is just specifically for the saints, and then the next day is for everyone who has crossed over.
Clearing that up from our last
podcast. Clearing that up from our last podcast.
And then the third is this saint's birthday.
Yes. How was your birthday, by the way?
It was great. It's always great.
Did you like your Statler and Waldorf?
I loved it. It just lit up my world. I hope that people kind of get that reference without us really having to explain it.
I know, right? And
I guess we should just explain it. It's kind of like us. We're like the two old white guys in the balcony from Sesame Street or the Muppets, whatever.
Okay, it was the Muppet Show.
Yeah, I know. I corrected myself. Stop getting so mad at me.
Yeah. Honey, that was not the whatever one. Sesame Street did not have that.
I know,
they were
you're
way
right.
too sassy for Sesame Street.
Too sassy. Yep.
Yeah. So you had a good birthday, though?
It was wonderful.
Good.
Yeah.
Seems like you're like, mom's the word on that. What about, did you go to see Wicked?
I did. Yes. That also was wonderful. It was great.
Did you cry?
I didn't. No. What part would I have cried at?
I don't know. I remember getting teary-eyed. I think it was at the end maybe, but I don't remember exactly what happened in the story. I was like, I think it was related to the Wicked Witch.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was because she was misunderstood or I don't know.
Totally misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
She's completely misunderstood.
Yeah. So
I loved her though. I fell so much in love with Elphaba.
Did you get a t-shirt?
I didn't, no.
Oh, well, then we can't be twins.
I can make one.
Yeah, well, you're very crafty in that way.
Or you could get a Purple Rain shirt like this one, and then we can be twins.
I have a Prince t-shirt, but yeah, maybe one day we should. No.
If you don't know this about Yolanda and I, that we were both slightly obsessed with Prince. Yes. And by slightly obsessed, I mean completely and utterly obsessed with Prince.
Entirely. We should do a whole podcast about him.
Oh my God.
That would be fun, like exploring the depths of Prince's lyrics. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let's move on to what we are, before we get too off track.
Yeah. We just like to get you guys warmed up, like get you cozied in, get your coffee ready, whatever you're doing. And now we dive into the topic, which seems like I didn't do this morning yet. So that may be part of the haywire.
Yeah, I didn't have time to this morning either.
Tell us what we're talking about, Tiffy.
Meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I love this topic. And I will admit that part of the reason that I brought this up to Yolanda that we should touch on this topic is, well, one, it's very important. Two, I know a lot of people struggle with it and a lot of people want to get into it but are afraid to, or have all these other limiting factors as to why they can't do it, but yet know how important and necessary it is.
Yeah.
But besides all of that, for selfish reasons, I've been off track of my meditation, and I was like, you know what, if we start talking about this, and if like the next week before our next podcast, we can commit to like 7 days of what's going to happen in our world and in our field as we're focusing on the topic, selfishly, it was a jump kick start for me too. So
I think
we're in this together.
So cool how everything that we talk about, I mean, it really does bring us back into deepening our own practice, no matter what it's about. So yeah, that's been the beauty of the podcast, is I think it takes us into like deeper into our own practice. So
every time
I'm here for it. So for everyone who is a Patreon, as you know, we do our Dear Diaries. So something that Tiffany suggested is that this week, what our Dear Diaries will include is letting you guys know some behind the scenes of what comes up for us and what our experiences are this week during meditation. But we would like to hear from you too. So after today's discussion, if you decide to, even give yourself just 1 week, if you don't have a regular practice now, if you give yourself 1 week to make time every day, even if it's like 5 minutes a day, just take note of what you experience and then share with us on the Facebook page.
And even if it's an experience that you don't think is what meditation is about, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's your experience, and your growth comes from the observation of the behavior and the patterns and the things that we're working to either change or to enhance for the better.
Wait, I just have to say, I am like in technology overload. I wish you could see. So I'm sitting at my desk, which is an L shape, and what I'm looking into is my laptop. To the left of me, my desktop is up for our discussion. So I have another computer screen up. Plus my phone is on one of those little, it holds the phone so it's in view. And I just realized, like, in my peripheral, like, oh my God. I'm like,
God.
Woo!
Getting on Facebook Live is technological overdrive for me.
Yeah. But so I'm sorry, just to it really was kind of like, this is a bit too much. I need to focus and meditate. But one of the first things I think that you mentioned in the intro that is huge with meditation right out the gate is the expectation that people have around it. Sorry, I just heard my front door. My new book, I think it just arrived.
Ooh, new books. I almost ordered a new one last night, and I was like, Tiffany, focus. Finish this 400-page one first.
I swear, you guys, we love books so much. Okay, again.
Sickness. Oh yeah, focus. So, we neither of us meditated this morning, so this is what happened.
Yeah, this is a good example of what happens when you don't focus before starting your day. But there is a lot of expectation around meditation that it can be, that you're supposed to quiet the mind entirely. And what happens is, people sit and their mind chatters as the mind does. That's what it's designed to do. It thinks. And so then they think they're doing it wrong because they're inundated with thought. But the thing is that you are in observation of your thought. You're not just in autopilot. You're not, what do you call it? People call it like flighty or scatterbrained. Like you are very consciously aware of what is coming up in mind. So in a very base level, I always tell people one of the best things you can do is let go of the expectation, let go of right and wrong, and just sit. And if what you notice are thoughts, notice your thoughts. but it's just part of practicing. As you allow yourself to just sit, your meditations will change.
And I like what you say all the time is to not sit in judgment. And I think a lot of people sit in judgment with what their expectation of meditation is. And the idea that you're this like Buddhist monk that's going to sit and levitate because there's nothing happening inside your mind or your brain is the biggest fallacy that is put on meditation altogether. And what I always like to say too is that when we meditate, it's like training a muscle in your body. You're not going to go to the gym and pick up a 50-pound weight and bicep curl it right off the bat. You have to start with 5 pounds, 10 pounds, work your way up to it. So the more that you put that time in and effort into doing what goal you want to get to, you're eventually going to get there, but you're not going to be able to pick a weight up that heavy right away. So sitting in observation of this is what the process of trying to get to that point is. And the point that you try to get to might change too throughout that journey.
Yep. And I will say too that there are different types of meditations out there. Yeah. So some types of meditation do have very particular focus or intentions wrapped around them. But one of the unifying traits of all meditations is that it's training you to direct your own mind, learning how to manage your own mind and your own thoughts. So like a good example of this I like to tell people is, we make up stories all the time, right? So say, for example, you call your friend and your friend doesn't answer the phone and you text them and then they don't respond. You will make up so many stories in your head about the possibility of what your friend is doing, why they aren't answering the phone. Your mind goes just haywire, which a lot of times you'll hear referred to as monkey mind. Your mind just goes all over the place from one single event. Whereas when you learn to meditate, you learn to refocus the mind so that it doesn't go just haywire all over the place. And one of the ways you can practice doing that is using like a mantra, or what is something else? People use like
Malas?
seed syllables and things like that. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
even mala beads, just anything that will help you direct your attention
Hmm.
on one pointed focus. And again, your mind will sometimes think and go off track, but you then notice that and don't judge it and just bring it back into whatever your point of focus is, like Om.
Or utilizing the breath, just
Yeah.
watching what your body normally does every day. And I mean, that's super impactful too. It's not just for meditation. If you're watching your breath, you become more aware of the awesomeness of what this body actually is and what it is that we're living inside and navigating every day. And as something so simple as breathing that we take for granted can be such a focus on what, calming our whole existence, quite literally.
Can you explain that for someone that, like in layman's terms, what it means when people say focus on the breath or observe the breath? Because I think when people hear it without really like surrendering to that, people try. And then it's that same thing, kind of like with meditation. They try so hard to focus on the breath that then they go into like, that discomfort of, ah. So
Yeah.
can you describe it in a way, or?
Sure. I mean, for me, what I take away when I hear that is to just observe the natural state of what my body does.
Mhm.
Like if I breathe in, I notice like my chest inflates or my stomach inflates, and the sensation of feeling the air come either in through my nose or in through my mouth, and then my mind goes other places like, wow, the oxygen comes in and it goes into my lungs, and my lungs processes this so quickly that it has a return out, so quickly, of all the crazy shit that our body is doing with something so simple, and to notice like, okay, if I'm breathing, how deep is my breath? Oh, I'm not breathing that deeply. It's just coming into my chest. Let me see if I can bring it into my belly, like
Yep.
kind of working with how my body is reacting to something that's so automatic and so simple. And how can I change that? Or let me just see what's a natural state of it right now and
I
why it's in this state.
I love that you describe it that way, because I think that's probably easier for people to digest, of like, oh, I'm observing the function of my back, like what happens to me when I'm breathing. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think too, for a lot of people who are very wow,
What's that?
logical and analytical. I was thinking of those two words at the same time. But people who, we all understand things differently. So even to hear that example, even though I know what it means, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's a beautiful way to illustrate how you can observe the breath. You're really
Mm-hmm.
observing the functionality and the sensation that you feel as a result of breathing, which
Mm-hmm.
again, we don't normally tune into because of it's just a natural function. We don't even have to think about breathing. It just happens.
Yeah.
But another thing I would like to bring up, because some people don't understand even like what is the benefit of meditation. So on one hand,
Before you go there, can I back
oh
up really quick to the
yes,
breath?
back.
Because rewind. Because I don't want to like diverge us off this path we're going down. But observing the breath, I can't remember what the name is right now in Sanskrit, but there's part of the breathing exercise when you meditate is holding it. There's a
Mhm.
retention. Rickshaw, I think is the word. I could be butchering that or be incorrect, but there's a there's a part of meditation when you're breathing and you hold the breath.
Mhm.
So even observing that, like holding your breath for a moment and seeing like what's it like to not have breath, because we do take it for granted, and observing the breath to be so in awe of what it does for us. And if you were to not have that, I think that's another component of observing, and that's part of meditating as well that you can just play around with.
Well, that's actually a beautiful segue for what I was going to say, because I was thinking about how there are different breathing techniques, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in a very basic way, when you think about meditation and think about focusing on the breath, think of how calming the breath can be, and how when you intentionally control your breathing pattern, you
Mm-hmm.
can literally calm the sensation of your entire physicality. So it reminds me of like when people hyperventilate, or, you know, they freak out and they hyperventilate, and you have them breathe into a bag to restrict, you know, the air to help them calm. Or like when people are trying to tell you to calm down, the first thing they say is, whoa, take a breath. Like,
Yeah.
breathe, just relax.
I've
And
never understood the breathing into a bag thing.
yeah, I think because it constricts, like,
The
you know, like,
oxygen that you're
yeah.
getting,
And
and it
so
makes
like
you
you
more
kind of,
mindful of it.
but I think it's just, you have to kind of manage or control the breathing with
Oh,
it
okay.
being so contained in that way. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, there's
And
limited oxygen in it.
yeah. And so another thing though is that I don't think we recognize in that how much control we have and managing our functionality just through our breath.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's another benefit of meditation is you really learn how to, one, we already mentioned, manage your mind, directing your own focus so you don't get monkey mind, but you also learn to, by default, how to manage your energy, like how you feel, how like adrenaline is pumping through you, all of these things. You actually can mitigate that, which is
Mm-hmm.
pretty freaking amazing.
I don't know all of the scientific aspects about it. I might, but I'm not digging that deep into my brain right now. But the yoga that I do, that's very specialized with, we do a lot of breathing in there, and it's very repetitive in the movements we do, and we do a lot of sets of it in order to transform the muscles. And there's a lot of breathing engaged in it, in order to, there's a response with the muscles when we bring in the oxygen. There's a relaxation response with the muscles, so it allows them to relax in order to stretch and transform in this certain practice that we do. But in that, there's a relaxation response when we get enough oxygen into our body. If we're not getting the oxygen, there's something that happens with the hormones that sends out messages for the muscles in the body to relax. And when we don't get it, you know, if you think about like when our fight or flight system on, which was designed for like running away from saber-toothed tigers, when that turns on, we're not processing these other things as much because we're running on adrenaline and cortisol that gets pumped into our system. And those hormones do not allow our muscles to relax. They constrict in order so that we can utilize them to get away from whatever the perceived threat is.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing though is that even day-to-day stress, our body doesn't know the difference. So like
Right.
even when, you know, normal stressors of life happen, our body responds oftentimes in the same way as if we're being chased by that saber-toothed tiger. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, I mean, it is very important. And I think, again, that speaks to the whole reason why we wanted to do the Mind Body Project overall, so
Mm-hmm.
that we can all learn more or even be in more consideration of our natural design and functionality. Because without having awareness or paying attention to how we can actually manage this, we do find ourselves in upset and stress and all of these different modes without realizing we can really make the change or, you know,
Yeah.
contribute to it or us functioning in it differently.
Right.
So, I mean, part of it comes with, you know, releasing our old stories and stuff, which we've talked about on many podcasts already. But meditation really does tune you into these different layers of mind, of breath, of
Mm-hmm.
just being, and how powerful these things are that we seem to overlook all the time. Like,
Right.
we really do.
And even just sitting in meditation, I mean, we're so busy with everything we have to do all of the time. If your meditation is literally just sitting for 5 minutes to just think rationally about something, it gives us the time to decipher real threats, you know. And by deciphering threats, I mean like understanding your stress and being like, is this appropriate for me to be stressing about this? Is this worth my stress? And like, if it's not, let it go. And if it is, figure out a way to tackle it in a better way, because that stress response in our system is fucking our shit up, quite
One of
literally. And it's why we're sick.
One of the things I love about it too, you just reminded me of, is I appreciate meditation because it does help you connect with your higher mind, because we do get it so entangled in that analytical mind and our
Mm-hmm.
stories and the monkey mind and all of the chaos that is just created between your two ears.
Yeah.
And I think, we don't often acknowledge how much that contributes to the stress that we feel and how out of control we feel. So when you do just take like 5 minutes, like Tiffany said, it doesn't seem like a lot, but those 5 minutes will gradually build possibly to a longer meditation. But more than anything, you're putting yourself in this practice of just being and observing you. That alone is so freaking powerful. And then you do start to notice the difference between like, oh, I am so in alignment and tuned in or paying attention to my higher mind, and I'm aware of the chatter that's going on down here. So you start to really come into relationship with your higher self, which we did a whole different podcast about. Check the archives. But that's also a great benefit because it helps us to be more confident in our own choices, decisions, all of these things.
I want to even break down when you say higher self or higher mind.
Mm-hmm.
If we put it in simpler terms, think about it as your subconscious mind. Everybody knows what their subconscious is, and I'm sure that they've had interactions with it to some degree. But as we're traveling through this life, we're taking in information into our brain. If in our physical body, we're always taking stuff in, and it's getting logged away somewhere. But when we're living with our reptilian mind, which is that mind that's just like, I need to stay alive, those two things, it's exactly what you're saying. Like there's so much data in that other stored place versus the reptilian mind that's just keeping us going. And it's like the first response to fear. There's an archives back there in our brain that has so much information to tap into that could benefit our experience and just how we're living life. But we're tapped into this very shallow piece of our brain because we're not taking the time to sit and quiet and get beyond that.
One of the things too I would describe to people as a higher mind is like it is that witnessing of yourself or the observer in like the example you gave for, okay, so say if I'm like I don't know, what's something people think about? Work, okay? So what if you're like, should I take this job? And your analytical mind is going through all the pros and cons. It probably has fear of making the change or doing something differently. And then you have this thing come up from your subconscious that's been stored away of some past trauma or fear that you experienced through like an old job, or maybe your mom and dad's old stories that they told you about what your job had to be and what your path had to look like. All of that is stored data. And then your higher mind is like the observer that witnesses all of that. It observes like it there's always this part of you. It's almost like this internalized thing where you're the one observing your thoughts. Do you know what I mean? People, you have thoughts going, but then there's this other aspect of you that is the observer. The observer is the whatever. So that higher mind, when you start paying attention to, wow, there's this aspect of me that is actually observing this other part that seems to be me. It sounds kind of complex, but the more you pay attention to it, the more it does start to make sense. But it all comes back to, again, like meditation is one of those spaces where you do start to become very aware of these different aspects of your mind and consciousness, because just in our conscious waking state, like, functioning out here in the world, we're not fully paying attention to the different levels and aspects of us that are working simultaneously and in conjunction. Our design just, it is unbelievable. And that's why I always tell people you have to practice the stuff to see for yourself, because it is really hard to articulate sometimes. And when people talk about all of these techniques, it can sound like, what the hell are they talking about? But
can I break it down to basics?
Honey, please. Basics? Oh, okay. Jesus, here she goes.
It's my favorite part because I'm so fascinated with our human bodies. And I feel like if we understood, we should be forced to take classes all through our lives, like all through any educational system about what the body is doing. Like not just go to med school if you're going to learn about it. Like we should know how these things work because it's very important. So, this kind of ties in with the way we're receiving information and where it gets stored and how we react to things. And meditation is the practice of quieting that down to calm it down, right? We want to find calmness in our body so that we're healthier, because when we're not calm, we're getting an influx of all these hormones that are being misused, as we were talking about with the fight or flight and saber-toothed tigers. And now it's all confused in the chaos that we live in now. So the amygdala is part of our brain, and that is in charge of like containing our memories and decision making and our emotional responses. Like that is the center that sends out like, how do you react to these things? What are you going to remember? So when we're in traumatic situations, all the information in traumatic situations goes right to the amygdala, because it's going to store it in there to later on say, hey, remember when this happened, this was the outcome. So this is a likely scenario that it could happen again. And then we respond accordingly. And a lot of times that is conditioned as children. So this is why we bring childhood wounds into adulthood, that we don't, if they're not properly fixed, then it fucks us up later on. So the amygdala is the one that gives messages to the hypothalamus, which is part of the brain. And the hypothalamus is the endocrine system. It controls the entire endocrine system. And the endocrine system is what pumps out the hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. So I don't know if you've ever had a rush of adrenaline that was not necessary. I have. It just floods the system and it actually physically hurts my body. And I'm like, that was not, it was unnecessary, but because my brain has been conditioned to certain responses, that's the way it was actually reacting. And it was irrational. So yeah. If you think about it in the physical sense and the emotional sense to some degree, when we're not properly conditioned to our responses of things, we're going to lash out emotionally, which is unnecessary, or actually physically. And taking the time to meditate, and like we said, taking that time to sit down and reason out what's the logical response to stress and behaviors, and what's not, then we can start to really parse out our physical health and our mental health.
Well, what you said, it reminds me of, it all comes back to the mind, because a lot of times when we have those feelings of extreme anxiety or like a rush of adrenaline that seems to come out of nowhere, it's usually, triggered by something that we're holding in mind, like something we echoed again and again, we've freaked ourselves out about. And sometimes, like you said, it could be in the subconscious mind. It's running in the background and you don't know what it is you're freaking out about consciously, but we still are impacted by all of these stories that we have, these imprints that we have. But why I have my other computer up, you just reminded me of too, I was looking up and just to tell all of you guys this too, you may want to look up research that has been done about specific to meditation, because there has been a lot of research done. And we've mentioned before in an episode, somehow in conversation, we talked about telomeres, which we'll get to, I'm sure. But I looked up this morning and there was this research done by Harvard researchers, and they were saying that their studies have shown that meditation has benefits against a lot of different conditions, not just physical, but also mental, but including irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, psoriasis, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and on and on. But this reminded me of many years ago, a friend of mine is friends with this man who started a company called Breatheology. And he has all of these crazy awards for he's a free diver, but he has the record for like holding his breath longer than anyone. Like
how long was that?
Insane. I don't remember. It was crazy though. Like it seems like inhuman. I want to say over 20 minutes. I forget, but you can.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I have his book actually. His book is called Breatheology, but his name is Steve. And he's a really, really nice guy. So I met him in person. And one of the beautiful things he has done is, again, he was a free diver and he has studied breathing like beyond anybody. He has literally been studied in relation to the breath, like there have been studies conducted on him and his ability and awesome. how it impacts our physiology. But anyway, so he also created a program, I remember a few years ago. I don't know if he still does it, but it was specific for people who suffered PTSD. And so he created this program to help them learn how to breathe and manage their breath in a way that would actually help them with post-traumatic stress. So I say all that to say, I mean, again, it's amazing the different ways we can heal and manage ourselves through our natural design. It's not like some outside thing you're bringing in. It's like we're designed to help tap into like our functional or optimal function, you know? It's
I have
crazy.
this book. It's called Meditation as Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And I pulled it out, of course, to go through like my highlighted and starred things because it's my favorite. But this book is awesome. It is so informative, and it's got a lot of scientific facts. It's written by a medical doctor and another PhD person. I mean, it's chock full of stuff. And we're just such incredible beings with such the power to heal ourselves and to heal others. And I don't think that that's encouraged enough in our society, you know, because we're continued to be pushed at being sick or being medicated, you know, and that tells the body that it's sick and it responds to that.
I was thinking about that in the shower this morning, like the thought of we are enough, but it's like we're more than enough. I mean, we're literally designed for this. Like you are so amazing by design. And we're just now starting to figure, well, some of us are just now starting to figure that out. I mean, a lot of ancient cultures knew this. Yes. They had practices and teachings that reflected this, but fortunately, more of us are having this curiosity to become more aware of our actual system and our design. So the other thing that was interesting to me about meditation regarding the studies was the telomeres. And the first time I heard about this was years ago. I was at a meditation retreat at the Chopra Center, Deepak Chopra's place in San Diego. And they were doing a study on meditation, and it was directly related to the elongation of telomeres. And so what a lot of people have found in scientific study is that meditation can elongate our telomeres. And I was trying to look up an easy way to describe what our telomeres are. And this was the easiest description I found.
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah. It said telomeres are the caps at the end of each strand of DNA that protect our chromosomes, like the plastic tips at the ends of shoelaces. Without the coating, shoelaces become frayed until they can no longer do their job. Just as without telomeres, DNA strands become damaged and our cells can't do their job. So our telomeres are very important. And something else I read said, like, over time, they start to wear away, kind of like the wick of a candle. So when you think that something like meditation can actually restore and repair and elongate them, that's freaking amazing. Google it, guys. Look it up.
I mean, and it makes me think, too, about the wear and tear of, like, excess hormones that are not necessary. You know, if they're, like, constantly rushing through our system and our systems are in overdrive trying to handle all of these things that are coming through, they eventually get tired and worn out too. I mean, I almost think that maybe aging isn't a real thing. It's just a culmination of all of our experiences that's inevitable, and we just don't take the time to release all of them.
Yeah. Well,
that's a little fantastical, but what if, you know?
It's funny that you said about aging, because that was the next part I wanted to share about telomeres. Part of the reason that people are so interested in them is because they think there's a direct link between telomeres and us aging. And so some people are trying to figure out, like, if we can figure out how to make our telomeres healthier, then we will also elongate life. And so the part around that is inside the nucleus of a cell, our genes are arranged along twisted double-stranded molecules of DNA called chromosomes. At the ends of the chromosomes are stretches of DNA called telomeres, which protect our genetic data, make it possible for cells to divide, and hold some secrets to how we age and get cancer.
Well, cancer is an incorrect replication of the DNA, overgrowth, that's when the telomere starts to unravel. You're making me think of one of my favorite bands is Tool. And they're very, like, deep with their lyrics and you would probably be really into them. If maybe not the sound, I love the sound, but a lot of people can't handle it. But the lyrics and stuff, and they have a song that's called 46 and 2, and it kind of like explores like, because our chromosomes are 23 and 23, which are 46, and the plus 2 is like, what would we be if we had 2 more of those chromosomes? I just want to put that out there. I really love that band and their just their thought.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That was really interesting. I forgot I was going to tell you. Oh, well, I wanted to make sure we get to this before we wrap up, because this has been a lot of, it's been.
Are we almost to the end?
Well, we have been going for almost 40 minutes.
No way.
Yeah, I know. Could you believe?
Oh, no.
So one of the things I want to make sure we get to is, because we've talked a lot about the benefits, I think, and always we recommend that you guys go out and research as well, because, I mean, there's so much information. There's no way we could cover it in just one podcast, although we will talk about it as a community next week.
And our experience is not your experience.
Right.
Your experience is your direct wisdom. So
yeah, and that's with all of these tools and practices. Everything.
Do you.
But so technique-wise, I just wanted to give some suggestions for people who may be new or struggling with meditation. So do you have any tips or techniques that you recommend about meditating, period, or even like prepping yourself for meditation, or anything that goes with this practice?
I have so many things. Well, one, I think, if you're really struggling, just take a class. And I know that you would advocate this too, because that's how you got into it. I had done it, and until I took a course, it was a 2-month course at a university here, and it was actually designed around a neuroscientific study that they had done.
But the athletes, I think you told us about that. Yeah, the
athletes. And that really, that exponentially shot my practice to a place I wouldn't have been able to have gotten on my own, I don't think. The other thing, without taking a course or class, I think just really getting in the habit, and this goes for anything. It's for health, fitness, anything. Just get into a routine, set an alarm if you have to, and wake up at a certain time, sit for 5 minutes, put your timer on for 5 minutes, and just be very disciplined. I think, that's, people find discipline very difficult, but it's at your disposal all the time. Just get out of your own fucking way and sit down for 5 minutes, or there's plenty of apps. There's an app called Insight, and that has anywhere from 1 minute to 2 hour meditations, just get disciplined and okay, if I can't do this for myself, let me have some support mechanism. And there's plenty of things out there. Headspace is another one I hear people use. That's really great. You kind of have an app on your phone. You're on your phone all the time. Why not just have an app on there that you can use for 5 minutes?
Well, one of the things that you said, I mean, it is true. How I started in meditation was through class, and that was huge for me, because I was not familiar with meditation at all. But one of the things you made me think about that I hadn't thought of prior to this moment is I've had instruction in meditation in multiple ways. But in my very first class, it was a Taoist meditation course. And I think it was like an 8-week course. But the interesting thing was we went in layers and we focused on different senses. So we learned how to just sit to start off with, just so that we could be in observation of our mind and our thoughts. Then the next week we focused on the breath. Then the following week we focused on visual meditation, like looking at a candle flame. Then we focused on auditory meditation. Someone came and played a flute and we just focused on the sound. So basically throughout this whole thing, we were guided to pay attention to our sensory as a mode of focus for meditation. And then when I did some Buddhist classes, I thought it was going to be about Buddhism, but really it was a meditation course pretty much. I mean, which goes hand in hand. But anyway, I thought it was going to be something totally different. More lecture is what I expected. Yeah. But in that practice, it was similar in that the first week, it was just entirely focused on your posture. That's it. That's all. Like having appropriate meditation posture. Then it was a practice of focusing your attention, like finding your drishti, like you would in yoga, like on both your eyes low. So each week in that also, it was adding another layer to your practice. So the point in all of that, my recommendation are two things. One, give yourself time to just know it's a process that you build on. Again, like we said in the beginning, it's not like you're going to close your eyes and have a totally clear mind like some Buddhist monk. But know that there are layers, and your meditation will transform as you keep just showing up. Just show up and sit and see what happens. Another recommendation is your meditation doesn't always have to be so formal. Sometimes if you just, if you're like, I don't want to go sit and close my eyes, well, still, maybe you could take a minute to just sit in a room and stare out the window. Like focus your attention on something outside and really allow yourself to pay attention again to your sensory, whether it's what you're looking at, maybe you pay attention to what's auditory around you, but having that self-observation consciously is another mode of learning to direct the mind, which is the point. So my other question for you is...
I have one more thing to add on to.
Oh, okay.
Can you remember that question?
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Okay, good. Well, I like what you're saying about the sensory stuff. And the one thing I'll add to that is when you look out the window, the difference of meditating and just looking out the window is when you daydream, that's your mind wandering. So the meditation is actually recognizing when you do daydreaming or bring it back to like, I'm just staring out the window. So just so that people have that little bit of knowledge when you're moving into that. And then the other thing, when you're talking about building onto things, this course that I did was 2 months long, and our homework was to go home and meditate. And the first week it started with 5 minutes. The next week it was 10. We built up to an hour. And I had so many things. I know I have a lot of things going on all the time, but like at this point I was juggling like 3 jobs, and I was like, and this class, and I'm like, you want me to meditate for an hour? Like, you must be crazy. But because I'm the type of student that I am, I was like, okay, that's the assignment. I'll do it. I'll get an A+. And thank God I did. And thank God that was the assignment, because I started meditating for an hour a day, and something happened. Like once it got up to 30 minutes, once I crossed over that threshold of over 30 minutes, something happened that I had never experienced before. And I don't want to say I became addicted to meditating, but I didn't want to go without it because of whatever this was after I hit that point of time. Like it's just so worth it.
Okay. Well, of course you always are like, every time you tell me, wait, can we go back? Whatever comes out of your mouth is like a segue into exactly what I was going to ask you every time. Like, knock it
Perfect.
off. So what I was going to ask you is, how do you feel? So can you share with us like what your experience of meditation is like? Like, can you give us some description of how it actually feels for you to meditate?
Yeah, well, I will tell you that meditation quite literally saved my life to some degree, because just my past, like my childhood, and like how I'm designed, I'm a freaking stress case, and I was dealing with anxiety pretty bad, and I didn't even know that I had anxiety. Like it wasn't something that I had come to understand at that point in time. And so for me, I translate everything physically, of course, because I'm hypersensitive in my body. And there was points where like it literally felt like my brain was shaking inside of my skull. So I chalked it up to like MS, Parkinson's disease. Like, I mean, there was one point I called my mom and she didn't answer. So I called every single member of my family. My dad was the last one to finally answer. And I'm trying to keep it together because I'm trying not to lose my shit. Because I
just have to say for people to know, because they might be wondering why I'm smirking like this isn't funny, but it is funny because this is a natural occurrence for her. Okay.
It is. It's so hard. I'm trying to work on it. And I have. Okay. So what I'm getting at is, anyways, I called and I talked to my dad, and I'm trying not to lose my shit because my mom was the one that talks me off the ledge. And I wanted to find her so that I could give her all this information. But my dad made me pour it out, and I was like, I think I have this disease. And he's like, oh, do you want me to fly your mother out there? I'm like, where's mom? I need to talk to her. But lo and behold, it was just anxiety. Okay. And so for many years, doctors left and right were trying to put me on like anti-anxiety drugs here and there. And I was like, no, I know I can do it. It just needs like meditation and all these other things, but like I wasn't able to do it on my own. But with a multitude of things, like some therapy and research on my own and studying and understanding and then putting into practice, it simply really was meditation that stopped it. I mean, I was able to gain control of the physical reactions of my body, and my brain doesn't shake anymore inside my head. You know, I mean, there was one time I confused that sensation with an earthquake. It was in the middle of an earthquake, and I was like, oh, here we go again. Like, it's that anxiety monster, but it actually was an earthquake. But I stopped that. I was able to like cease the response of my body that was causing, I mean, it was induced by stress, but it was creating even more stress. And you see how vicious that cycle can get. So, I mean, beyond it curing the actual physical ailments that were driving me literally crazy and thinking that I had some other physical disability to some degree, now I'm at the point where when I do sit and meditate, it's just this euphoric sensation that I can't get from anywhere else. It is just this kind of peace and sanctity that I haven't experienced in any other manner of life.
Well, the beauty of what you're saying, I think it really highlights again how much when we learn how to, we can manage and mitigate all of that. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't think if someone hasn't meditated and they hear this, it sounds impossible to think that we could manage anxiety, you know, because when you're caught in that storm of it, it's a mess. And that's actually what led me to meditation, is because I was going through the stress and anxiety of like what to do with my life. And I started freaking out. And so that's exactly what led me to it as well. But it is unbelievable, these elements of meditation, again, the breathing, how that's going to calm like your whole nervous system, but then also the directed focus of the mind so that you don't go into all of these stories of chaos. And when you think about just those two simple components, of course, it's going to reel it all in so that you don't go into this tailspin of hysteria. And again, I mean, I always say, with everything I've learned in practice, whether energy work, meditation, yoga, and I mean, asanas, everything, if I could only do one thing ever again, it would be meditation, because there is something so amazing about not just the self-observation, self-understanding, self-connection. That self-management is huge with everything in our life. And again, it also connects you with that higher mind. So then it just changes your overall life experience in so many ways that we don't have time to tell you about right now.
Right. It's very empowering because, as you say, like, it is, the self-management comes back to like everything in your life that feels out of place or incorrect or disruptive or chaotic comes back to you managing yourself.
Yeah.
Everything. And it comes back into how you perceive it, and all the things that we've done, all of the past podcasts on, it comes back to you. Everything comes back to you. And if you understand you, then you can manage it. And meditation is probably the number one useful tool in being able to walk through that door of self.
Yeah. And one of the things I want to point out too, because a lot of people, there's a lot of different perceptions around posture for meditation. So some people feel like your posture isn't important. Some people feel like you can lay down and meditate and that's fine. And I mean, really, technically, of course, you can meditate in any state. But what a lot of people have a hard time with is staying awake when they lay down to meditate. So I would challenge you to try a sitting meditation just so that you have more of a chance of staying alert and consciously aware. But, you know, some people just tap out in meditation. They're gone. But that it doesn't always stay that way. Again, it may change throughout your practice as you go. But I would challenge you all again, if you haven't had any consideration of your posture, just try it and notice what it feels like for you. Because you may notice that it does feel better for your meditation to be in a more erect posture. So for me, for example, right now, the way I'm sitting, my tailbone is kind of tucked. I'm super relaxed. I'm not hyper tuned in, so to speak. But if I just adjust my posture and sit with my spine really straight and like open it's like all of a sudden I'm more alert. Like it's weird. Like you just feel more aware and more present or something. That's just my experience. But, again, challenge you to try it and notice if you notice or feel any shift just in your posture alone.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Because
Yeah.
I tend to be able to get into a deeper meditation when I lay down. But that's because I'm hyper aware of my body. And I'm like, oh, my neck hurts. I can't relax this. I can't relax that. And if I'm not worried about it, but I don't tend to have narcolepsy very easily. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but everybody's different, and maybe even if you start meditating and you can't stay awake, you're still going to enter into a mindfulness practice of maybe I need more sleep. Maybe I should sleep more during the night. Maybe I should watch less TV so I could get to bed earlier, and then see how like little steps can start to shift you into that meditation practice.
And that's why I think journaling is a nice component to add to your post meditation, because sometimes your mind does become clear, or if you're just starting, you may have a lot of mind chatter. And if you know in the back of your mind, like, oh, I'm going to journal when this is over, it gives you less feeling or need to attach to the thoughts that arise or to attach to any particular outcome, sensation, anything. Because no matter what, when the experience is over, you're going to let out whatever comes up. So you can write down what you thought about. You can write down what you felt. Even if you fell asleep, when you open your eyes, before you start going and doing something else, take a second to just write, how do I feel right now? What are my thoughts at this moment? Did anything come up for me? And just write and see, because, you never know.
I think that's a good segue to send them off and get to it.
Go meditate.
Now I know all I want to do is go meditate. Like as soon as we're off this, I'm going to do a good at least 20 minutes before I go to class.
Yeah, well, so we know that you all will see this on Wednesday, but today is Monday and it's voting day. And
No, it's Tuesday, girlfriend.
Oh yeah, today's
We've already
Tuesday.
moved past Monday.
I know, right? It's Tuesday. So today is voting day, and I just recently moved, and so there's this whole debacle. So anyway, I have to go take. Somehow they ended up putting me listed as a mail-in voter only. I have never mailed in a ballot in my life. I have always been an in-person one. So now I have to take this thing to the voting place to trade it in to be able to vote. Listen. So after this, I'm going to vote, and then I will be back in-house to do my meditation and get my mind right.
I'm going to get my mind right before I go vote. And then I might not have to do it again after I vote. So
yeah, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully all of you will meditate, practice, again, a few minutes a day. There's guided meditations to help you if you don't feel like you can just do it on your own. And we will post again for our Patreons what our experiences are, and we invite all of you to please share with us on Facebook.
Yeah, let us know.
Anything else, Tiffy?
That's it. I feel pretty good about that.
All right.
I can't wait for everybody else to fall in love with meditation like we have.
I know. Who would have thought? It is such a beautiful thing. And we could also post links for you all about the books that we brought up and any recommendations that come up. Deal?
Deal.
Okay.
Bye.